In this video, we are going to see 5 amazing chess traps in the Sicilian defense for the white pieces that you can use to trick your opponents and win more games. So let's move on to our first trap. So after e4 c5, knight f3, d6, you go c3. This is the Alpine variation. Then black goes knight to c6, you play d4. And here, instead of taking this pawn, black goes bishop g4, pinning your knight to the queen and also threatening c takes d4. But you just completely ignore this and play d5, attacking this knight. He goes knight to e5, putting more pressure on this knight. But here you are going to shock your opponent with knight takes e5, sacrificing your knight. If he takes your knight, then you will take his bishop and you will be pinning, so he takes your queen. But then you can play bishop to b5 check. Now queen is forced to block, and then you can take this queen, and after king moves, you can play knight takes f7 check, forcing this king to take the bishop. And instead of taking this rook, first take the bishop and you can capture the rook later, and you are completely winning in just 10 moves. Let's move on to our next trap. After e4 c5, knight f3, knight c6, you go d4, takes, and then black goes knight to f6. You play knight to c3, he goes e5, attacking your knight, and here instead of taking this knight, you play knight with e5, threatening to play knight to d6 check. He goes d6, preventing knight to d6. Then you just play knight to d5, threatening to play knight to c7 check, which will fork the king and the rook. So he goes knight takes d5, and then you just recapture this knight, attacking this knight. Going back will be just a waste of a move, so he goes knight to e7, but then you can play c4, defending this knight. Here he goes a6, attacking this knight, but you are going to play the brilliant queen to a4. If he takes your knight, then he will take his rook, so he goes bishop to d7, pinning your knight and also defending the rook. But this was a big blunder because you can play knight takes d6, checkmate. Let's move on to our next trap. After e4 c5, knight f3, d6, you go d4, takes, and then knight f6. You play knight to c3, defending this pawn. He goes a6. This is the knight of variation of the Sicilian defense. You play bishop g5. He goes e6, and then you go f4. He goes knight with e7. Then you play bishop to c4, developing the bishop. He goes b5, attacking this bishop. And here, instead of moving this bishop back, you are going to sacrifice your bishop and play bishop takes e6. And after f takes e6, you recapture this pawn with the knight, attacking the queen. He goes queen to b6. Then you play knight to d5, attacking this queen further. So he goes knight takes d5, and then you recapture this knight with the queen, attacking the rook as well. Here, bishop to b7 seems like a natural move, attacking this queen and also developing the bishop. But here, you're going to play knight to c7 check, which is a clear sacrifice, opening up the e6 square. Now queen is forced to take, and then you can play queen to e6 check. Now bishop is forced to block, and then queen takes e7 is a checkmate. Let's move on to our next trap. After e4 c5, d4, c takes d4, you play c3. Black takes this pawn as well, and then you recapture this pawn with the knight. Now he goes knight c6, you play knight f3, he goes d6, and then you play bishop to c4. He goes knight to f6, a normal development move, and then you play e5, attacking this knight and also attacking this pawn. First, if he goes d takes e5, then you can play queen takes d8 check, and after the knight takes, you can just play knight to b5, and there are just so many threats to handle. And here, if he takes this pawn, with the knight, then you can play knight takes e5, and after pawn takes e5, you can play bishop takes f7 check, deflecting this king away from the defense of this queen. And after king takes, you can just take this queen and you are completely winning. Let's move on to our next trap. After e4 c5, knight c3, he goes knight c6, you play f4. This is the grand prix attack. He goes d6, opening up his bishop. You play knight f3, he goes bishop g4, pinning your knight to the queen. Then you just play bishop c4. And here he goes e5, striking in the center. You just ignore this and play short castle. And here knight to d4 seems like a natural move, putting more pressure on this knight. But here you're going to shock your opponent with knight takes e5, sacrificing the knight. If he takes your knight, then he will take his bishop, so he goes bishop takes d1, capturing your queen. But this was a big blunder because you can play bishop takes f7 check, king e7 is the only move, and then knight to d5 is a checkmate. Well, this is not the end. If you want to see some more amazing chess traps like these, then you can check out this playlist. And if you don't want to miss the upcoming videos, then don't forget to subscribe.